My name is Jonathan Lewis. I'm the Director of Evangelization, Youth and Young Adult Initiatives in the Catholic Archdiocese of Washington in D.C., and I'm happy to sort of host and moderate some of this conversation this afternoon and evening for those of us on Eastern Time. I can see there are a handful of us on today. If you would, on the chat feature, which is located in the bottom right of your screen, open that and type in to the search bar, clicking the send to everyone, and type in your name and position and diocese you work in. I know we can see each other's names, but that way we'll have a context for the type of ministry specific to young adults that each of us serves in. So if you would go to the chat function, make sure it says send to everyone, and then type in your name and position. And then we'll get started here in a little bit, but we can have a chance to get to know each other a little bit before that. Thank you, Mike. And sister. And Ed. We've got quite the national quadrant here. And Mark from Grand Rapids. Nice diversity across the country. And Edwin and Mark, can you remind us what positions you serve in Seattle and Grand Rapids, respectively? We also have with us behind the screen, if he wants to show himself before Paul starts going, John Sicko from moving us in between our moderated conversation and the live proceedings in San Jose. So thank you, John, for tagging us. I promise I resist my urge to provide color commentary on the fashion choices of Paul Jordan.
Well, actually, I think that your mobile devices actually are probably nice and warm in your pocket because they are at home. They've come home to the headquarters of Google and Apple, so your cell devices are feeling like, oh, it's like home. It's actually kind of fitting, actually, that we should be here in what is Silicon Valley, the digital kind of capital of the universe, where really the future that a lot of our young adults that we work with really took shape. And so here we are talking about the future of the ministry of the world in which this all takes place. This is great. By the way, I am Paul Jarzembowski. I coordinate youth and young adult ministry at the USCCB, and I'll be your host for the next 2 days here at the National Leadership Forum on Ministry with Young Adults. It is not just good that our phones are here, but it's also good that you are here. You right here assembled in this room is really the heartbeat of the church's ministry with young adults. And I also know that we have a number of people who are participating digitally online, and so I know that extends to those who are participating with us by means of digital technology, which is wonderful. But many of you come from different places. There's a great diversity in the room. We are united by this common cause to work with young adults. We're united by our faith, but we come from different geographical areas, different cultural traditions. We come from different perspectives and experiences. We have veterans and we have newcomers. It's an interesting group. And you notice that we did somewhat do a little bit of dividing today. You have tables that are split up by diocese and parish. We're not meant to, completely separate you, but for this particular experience, we do want to allow you to speak with your peers at tables, but then in the large group, we'll have a chance to interact between the tables, and then, of course, during the breaks and at the social times, definitely have ways to interact. But so I like to ask, who is here? So those who work in a diocese, a show of hands, who's here from a diocese? All right, fantastic. Parish people, who works at a parish ministry of young adults? Fantastic. How about campuses? Any college campuses? Couple, okay. Organizations, national movements, apostolates. All right. So it's definitely a diverse crowd. How many from the West Coast? Maybe the West or Pacific Northwest. All right. How many from the mountain areas? Anyone from the mountains? All right. How about the Southwest? The great Southwest. Anyone here from the Southwest? Wow, not as many from the Southwest. All right. You can't claim both California and the Southwest. What's going on here? I guess it is technically, but how about the Midwest? Midwesterners. All right. The South. All right. A couple people from the South. Excellent. How about the Mid-Atlantic area? And then maybe New England. All right. And Alaska. Hawaii? Any Hawaiians? Toronto. All right. We have international. This is an international gathering. Now, how many of you have been in ministry specifically with young adults? Less than a year.
I know our audio went out. If you can hear me, we'll try to get that back going on soon.
Doing direct young adult ministry in a parish, or maybe you're a diocesan director of just young adults. But maybe some of you also work with other populations, so I'm just curious. So obviously all of you at some point, you're probably here because you have some connection with young adults. But some of you may be combined with it. So if you combine young adult, and how many of you combine with youth ministry? A number of you. How many with campus ministry? How many with evangelization? How about religious education? A couple. Vocations. Okay. Pastoral juvenil, Hispana. All right. Anything? What else have I missed? Yeah. What other things have I missed? Anything else? It's a nice young adult and. Yes. Peace and justice. Right. Anything else I've missed? Yes. Marriage, yes, family and marriage. Anyone else, family and marriage along with a couple? Maybe. So we have a wide diversity here, and that's great. Now, our online guests, I'm not sure if there are people from the online community who do we have there? Anyone? By the way, I just want to let you know. So we have our live gathering, but we also have those who have gathered on a webinar. Thanks to the Catholic Apostolate Center, has been very generous. So we have some people participating who are listening to us by way of the web. So be careful what you say. It's on the internet, and once it's on the internet, it never goes away. So, how about for the people on over there?
We have one sister from Louisiana, or New Orleans, sister of Notre Dame.
From New Orleans.
A person from the Archdiocese of Seattle.
Archdiocese of Seattle, so they're Pacific Northwestern.
And someone from
Richmond,
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, and Washington, D.C., right? In Washington. Great. So you can see that we come from all over, but we're all united by this. So this is why we're here. We're going to really get to unpack this. And so I wanted you to just kind of see that when you came into this room, you have your perspective. But as you can see, the perspectives in terms of ministry, geography, experience is quite diverse. And there's a beauty to that. And I think that a lot of the conversations we're going to have over the next 2 days will reflect that rich diversity we have in the type of work that we do. Now, let me get down to logistics. You got a packet when you came in, so I want to just quickly go through that with you. So in your packet, you will see that you have a program, and the program is this. 122, you got that? So the program book is your guide for the next 2 days. It includes the schedule, and it includes a little bit about some of the people we're hearing from, as well as a note of thanks. And I'll go over that in a second. But just some other things that are in the packet. Some other things in the packet. We have one of the things that many of you may have heard in the preparation for this is we have a call for white papers to really kind of explore this question of what is the future of young adult ministry. And so in what's that? Excellent. Great. Thank you. Cool. So you have here in your packet, this is a 60-page document which includes the white paper submissions that were received. It includes some of the people you'll be actually hearing from live. We also included at the end of it the address of the Apostolic Nuncio to the bishops a couple of weeks ago, where he specifically focused on ministry to young people. And so I included that at the end of it as well, because even though the Apostolic Nuncio did not submit a white paper, I kind of gave him a pass and thought that that address was certainly worthy of the same questions that we're asking. So that's in here as well for your consideration. So this is the thing. It's really, this is rich, full of the snapshot of what the conversation is about. And I know many of you probably have your own words to add to this, and that's going to be what we're doing today, is you'll be able to contribute to that conversation. But this is a great snapshot, and I encourage you as you go home that much of the stuff that's in here, I think, is worth us to consider as we continue to process through what does the next generation of young adult ministry look like. Other things in your packet, we have a prayer card. The Blessed Mother here can't leave home without her. So we have the prayer card there. We also have information on the Bishops' Conference and kind of what we do for young adult ministry. It kind of gives you a little bit of this little 1/3 sheet gives you a little bit of insight as to what we do at the Bishops' Conference for young adult ministry. And we also want to get your feedback, so we have a form for you to, at some point, we also are going to have it in our booth at NCCYM, but if you want to fill one out, just to give us a sense as to what are you thinking about ministry today? What should the bishops know about ministry with young adults? We have some information about a webinar we're having upcoming in December on World Youth Day. You find there are some sheets here. These are going to be for our discussion later. There's 2 sheets for discussion for you to take notes during the roundtable discussions that you'll be having. And then there's also information, and again, we'll go into this later, about the Convocation of Catholic Leaders that's taking place next year, also sponsored by the bishops. So there's a lot of good stuff in here, and of course, if you get more information from people, definitely put that in there. You also see 2 business cards. One is from myself, so if you have further questions, please be in touch. The other is from the chairperson of our, and I'll get into more details of what this means, but our new National Advisory Board for Young Adult Ministry, Nick Stein, who's here. And so there is, both of us are here to kind of help you out in this area. So that's what's in your packet. But in terms of the schedule, let me just briefly tell you about that. Now, today we're going to focus really on how we got to this point and where we are, where we are now in terms of young adult ministry. Tomorrow, we're going to be looking ahead and where we're going next. We also think it's quite fitting that when the Holy Father announced the themes for the next 3 years of World Youth Days, that he is also taking us on a journey. And, you know, we have this kind of desire as, I think, ministry leaders, as human beings, that when we talk about the future, we always want to jump straight to, well, this should be fixed, and that, we should do that, we should do that. And what Pope Francis is reminding us of is, yes, it's important to look to the future, but a good way to do that is to be in discernment, and that involves looking back, and that involves looking around, before we can really start looking ahead. So that's really what we're doing over the course of the next 2 days, is looking back, looking around to look forward. Very much like the themes of the next World Youth Days from 2017 to 2019, which are in your program there. You see those themes with scripture themes. Now, practically speaking, I want to know, we've got breaks. We will have different breaks throughout the time, and we'll let you know when it's time for stretching. All important, if you haven't discovered them yet, or if you're just waiting for this announcement, where the bathrooms are. Across the hall and down the way, there is, on the left-hand side there are some bathrooms. There's also bathrooms around the corner this way. So there are a number of places for you to do that. We'll also be having breaks, and during those break times there will be opportunities for food and drink. And so that is down the hall, and down this hall or down that hall. At the very end, there'll be a food and refreshment stand. So when we do take breaks, there will be some food and refreshments set up there. So be sure to grab that. Don't unhydrate yourself. Definitely hydrate. Definitely, you know, be well fed and well stocked. So yes.
For the live streaming, is there do you need a password?
For the live streaming, do we need a password? Okay, so there is a registration. Yeah. So there is a link that, for those who are participating online, if you're talking to them, there is a link that was sent in the email. And so they just.
Is that been promulgated?
Yeah, it was on the registration.
Yeah, capital Y, what is it again? Y-A-M?
Yeah, yeah.
So the password is YAM.
All caps.
All caps. So we are going to have Mass tonight, Tony had asked. So we have Mass tonight at the Cathedral. Bishop Caggiano is here. He will be celebrating Mass at the Cathedral down the block. So at 5:45 we will break. We will make our way over. Mass is at 6:15, so it gives us a half hour to get from here to there, and we'll have a wonderful celebration of Mass this evening. Afterwards, this evening, after the Mass, there is some social options, and some of our team members will be telling you a little bit more about some of the options this evening, where we can dine together if you so desire. If you're enjoying the company throughout the day and you want to extend it to the evening, we will have some social options, so you can join us for meals this evening right around the cathedral. And of course, there's opportunities for networking. You're here at tables, so please do that. Please network as much. I mean, people have always told us one of the things they love about these gatherings is not so much the guy behind the microphone, point, you know, case in point right here, but really about the conversation at the tables. The opportunity for you to meet people who are doing and are passionate about the work that you do. So definitely, please take time to network for this. And throughout all of this, we have moments of prayer. And so that segues for myself. We're going to spend time in prayer throughout, because we know that we can't do any of this work without the guidance of the Lord. And so with that in mind, Gabrielle and Patrick are going to lead us in our opening prayer. And and the bishop, don't forget, I'm sorry.
Not going to forget.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
I invite you to listen with your hearts and your minds to these opening verses from the Gospel of St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. For all things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. For the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to testify to the light. For the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world.
Please join me in saying the Magnificat. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked upon his handmaid's lowliness. Behold, from now on will all ages call me blessed. The Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is from age to age. To those who fear him, he has shown might with his arm, dispersed the arrogant of mind and heart. He has thrown down the rulers from their thrones, lifted up the lowly. The hungry he has filled with good things. The rich he has sent away empty. He has helped Israel his servant, remembering his mercy according to his promise to our fathers, to Abraham and to his descendants forever. If I could have you all please stand up as we join in song, Hail, Holy Queen. Sing with us, ye seraphim. Heaven and earth resound the hymn. So many, so many, so many great Jesus. All the lights are seen here below. Oh, my Savior, our hope and sorrow and repose. Oh, my Savior, triumphal, ye cherubim, sing with us, ye seraphim. Heaven and earth resound the hymn. So they, so they, so they raise Jesus. And when our life breaks Jesus, oh, thy Son, Christ Jesus, oh, my Savior, triumphal, ye cherubim, sing with us, ye seraphim. Heaven and earth resound the hymn. So they, so they raise Jesus.
And we together pray this sons and daughters of the light prayer. Gracious and loving God, help all young men and women to be a light for all the world to see. In all the places they live and work, let their light shine for all peoples, for their families, for their church communities, for their cultures and societies, for the economic and political systems, for the whole world. Coming into the room where the disciples were gathered after the resurrection, Jesus, your Son, said, "Peace be with you. Make these men and women bearers of Christ's peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. Teach them the meaning of what was said on the mountain, for they shall be called sons and daughters of God. Send them, Father, as you sent your Son, to free their brothers and sisters from fear and sin. We ask this of you in Christ's name. Amen."
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Please be seated. Because we're not going in peace yet.
So many of you may be wondering, why is the USCCB facilitating this gathering? I'm just going to give you a very short version as to how this came about. In short, though, the bishops do care very much about young adults. At the General Assembly this month, young adults were spoken about on a number of occasions in the large gathering and continuing in the various committees and work that's happening. Specifically, the Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth has taken an intentional leadership role of young adult ministry nationally. Now, this came about because of the foresight and vision of Miss Amy McEntee. Something to get back there. She saw that a collaborative vision of the future for young adult ministry is where bishops work together with the practitioners like you to advance the work that needs to happen. Now, NCCYM, as many of you have known, has guided young adult ministry for 35 years. But it needed a new path forward, just as the topic of young adults became more prioritized in dioceses and at the Bishops' Conference. So here we stand at this crux. The pathway for the next 3 or 4 years is an incredible pathway. The Holy Father has laid out for us a future for the next 3 or 4 years. This is our moment. First of all, it's the first ever Vatican Synod on young people. That's going to be taking place in 2 years. And, of course, we anticipate an apostolic exhortation will follow, again, on young people. That is, and the journey that we take to get from there to here is an incredible one. We also have the national encuentro process that's happening over the next several years with this very specific focus on young people. There is the Convocation of Catholic Leaders happening next summer, again, with an emphasis on emerging leadership. The 25th anniversary of the first World Youth Day in the United States in Denver takes place in 2018. And then, of course, there is our country and our world's journey towards World Youth Day in Panama. We got those themes that came out last week. So the next 3 or 4 years are a very exciting time for us. And we have been built on a foundation that has been growing for the last several decades. So we really do stand at a very unique point. And I think it's because we stand at that very unique point in the Church's history in the United States and across the world that the bishops are gathering us together at this summit for this reason. But I also want to give you a chance to hear directly from a bishop. There's no sense me talking to you about bishops. We have a bishop in the room. So, sorry, how's that?
What a scary thought.
What a I'd like to introduce to you a real advocate for youth and young adults at the Bishops' Conference, Bishop Frank Caggiano. He is a member of that Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth. In that committee, he serves as the World Youth Day Episcopal Liaison for the conference, which means he's the main point guy for World Youth Day amongst the bishops. He is also on the Committee for Evangelization and Catechesis, and on that committee, he serves as the chairman of the Subcommittee on the Catechism. So he'll probably quiz you later about that. Just kidding. I should also tell you what he does in his day job. He is the Bishop of Bridgeport in Connecticut. And, an acknowledgement to Paul over here, he is a native of the Diocese of Brooklyn, where he was an auxiliary bishop for a number of years. He is the Episcopal Advisor to the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, which is another reason why he's here at this conference. And he's an all-around fantastic guy to have around to have a discussion about these things. So there's a lot more I could probably say, but you'll probably want to shout me off the stage. Yeah, I can stop now. Yeah, okay. But so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Bishop Caggiano. Thank you, Paul. I wonder what that's going to cost. My friends, I'm delighted to be here and to add one voice to all of your voices as we spend this perhaps a day plus together, exploring what I think, as Paul said, is a unique moment in the life of the church. To be honest, to ask the question, do the bishops care for the young people? Of course, the answer is yes. But if you had 300 bishops in the room, they would have 300 slightly different answers as to why. And you know, love needs to be concretized. So from my experience of working with my brother bishops, some of the areas that certainly concern them, ways that they would like help in guiding forward to show concretely their love for young people include the world of catechesis, to empower young people with the knowledge of the faith so that they feel comfortable in their skin as disciples of the Lord in the Catholic Church. They want to empower young people, empower them in many ways as they begin to plan relationships, marriages, and families. To do that with the support of the larger community. They also very much want to help foster community among those who see it as a value. In the age where many say, I'm spiritual but not religious, that's a concern. And they're looking for ways, and I think in this room, there are many ways already at work that can be of help. So the bishops are here standing behind you and with you as your advocates and your spiritual fathers to lead this effort forward. So that's my general endorsement. Allow me to give you two personal reflections. The first goes to St. John the 23rd, who in one of the most, and he had many famous sayings, in one of those most famous sayings, he was asked, well, what do you hope to achieve, Holy Father? And he said, I have not come here to be a curator of a museum. I have come here to be a gardener in the Lord's vineyard. I want you to keep that image in mind, my friends, in this day. Because the truth is, every single one of us has been called to become a gardener in this one particular moment in the life of the church. There is lots of new life being born, isn't there? You see it firsthand. It's like small plants finally bursting through the soil. Part of what we're about in our common love for young people is to start connecting the dots. It's to start tilling the soil. It's to start to get rid of the weeds that are not bearing fruit and all start rowing, hoeing, digging together in the same direction. And I know I speak for the bishops, at least the ones I know personally, and all the bishops. We are ready to be your co-workers in doing that and to follow that which you will recommend. Because in the end, it is all about the people we serve. Our ministry is not about us. It's about them. But now I have a second and even more personal.
Now, I'm going out on the limb, and I always do that, and sometimes I get into trouble. Most of the time I don't. Today, I don't think I will. We'll see. I have a premise. This premise animates just about everything I do, both as a man of faith, as a teacher, as a catechist, as a priest, as a bishop. And the premise is this. I do believe with all my heart that we are at an inflection point in the life of the human race. We are in a particular moment where a lot of what was familiar is passing away and new life is being born. Just like the printing press changed all of humanity, I think technology and the social media revolution is changing the very fabric of human life. Nobody knows where it's going. I, least among everyone in this room, although I do have a phone. But our young church is probably the best equipped to navigate the waters before us. Even though they are enmeshed in it, even though at times they may be drowning in those waters, but it is their world. And it seems to me, not only for ministry for them and with them, but for ministry to everyone in the church and people of goodwill, seems to me to partner with the young church and young adults in particular, give them and empower them to have a voice and to make them partners in ministry, can be a golden opportunity to bring a true renewal to the life of the church. I feel it, I sense it, I know it in my heart when I pray, when I sit in quiet before the Lord, I can hear Him whispering, I can hear Our Lady, I can feel her nudging forward. This is the moment. This is the time. This is our age to do this, to bring all of these voices together and find a way to bring the precious gift of faith, the precious gift of community, and the person of Jesus Christ to future generations. And I believe young adults have a key that we cannot lose. So I stand before you as an individual to say, why do I love young people? It's because they have much to teach me. And I think they have much to teach us in this room. So having said all that, I think we have a lot to do, my friends. And rather than continue to go on, I'm going to pass it on to those who are going to begin to break open this conversation for all of us. Thank you all very much.
Now, as the bishop was saying, it's not just him. There are others, and I have a few messages. Throughout this, throughout our forum, we have several bishops who have offered their words to you throughout. And so I'd like to begin by, throughout the schedule, you'll be hearing different bishops. So the first two I would like to introduce you is Bishop Kevin Rhodes from the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend, and Bishop Michael Olson from the Diocese of Fort Worth.
Greetings to all of you participating in the conference on the future of young adult ministry.
Hold on.
I'm Bishop Kevin.
Anyone who's technologically savvy, tell me why my video isn't playing on the PowerPoint. Or, I'm sorry, on the screen. Yeah, I know, exactly. Yeah, no one, of course, is it was actually a part of this.
You're trying to get this video on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so you probably have it in presenter mode, so you want to have it duplicating this display.
Oh, that's right. See, look at this. See? Yeah, so
So-
it is duplicating, so that's the
commercial. to actualize the mysteries of our redemption, the graces that flow from the merciful and loving heart of Jesus. Our aim in young adult ministry must be that of helping our young adults to encounter Christ in and through His church, to embrace discipleship as the way to true freedom, joy, and inner peace. I encourage all of you to consider how young adult ministry is precisely ordered to this end, and to consider ways to bring our young adults to experience in the church this encounter with the person of Jesus Christ, especially through guidance and help in prayer, in cultivating a spiritual life, and discovering the rich Catholic spiritual tradition. May the Lord bless you and the Holy Spirit guide you in your reflections at this forum. And thank you for your devoted service to the church and our young adults.
All right, now I'm going to try and do the you want to hit like number 1 on the top there? Excellent. So throughout, again, we're going to make sure that technically it works much better next time, but we'll be hearing different bishops have, we've invited, and a number of bishops have taken us up on the offer of sharing some insights with you. We're going to spread that out throughout our time together. Again, so that you know, I mean, obviously, you know, Bishop Frank is here with us, but you know, there are many other bishops who are here praying for you, and you know, and a lot of these videos will be available later on our website so that you'll be able to see them better, you know, later as well, and show them as well to your people to let them know of the care. So now, one of the things I'd like to do is move us towards looking back a little bit, and it's not looking back for the sense of nostalgia, but looking back for the sense that we can't move, again, as I said, we can't move forward until we take into account the past, the ground in which we walk. The bishop's, the Pope's theme of this coming year, the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is His name. The ground in which we walk in young adult ministry was tilled and planted by our pioneers, who came together in the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, to craft a vision and a framework for us. Without these leaders, without their vision, none of us would have the jobs we do. None of us would have this work. We stand on their shoulders. And we felt that this very month is the 20th anniversary of Sons and Daughters of the Light, the foundational document of our ministry. And so we felt it very appropriate, if we were going to look to the future, that we take into account what happened 20 years ago and what happened 20 years before that, of how we came to this point. And so we've invited the consultants to the Bishops' Conference 20 years ago who helped write Sons and Daughters of the Light. And so it is with much gratitude that we've assembled this team. And it's going to be moderated by a voice from our recent experience of ministry at NCCYM with Amy. which again has done so much work for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, let her introduce our panel and our conversation as we look to where we've been. Amy?
If you give us just a minute to get assembled up here. World Youth Day is not the whole world, it's not just youth, and it's not just a day. Welcome amongst yourselves. You're all ready. When I first started working in a ministry field, one of my diocesan directors said to me, "Documents are our friends." And as a church nerd, I have been known to say to people, my favorite our moment. This is our moment. But what was the moment then when sons and daughters came to be? Is comprised of, first, I corrected we met earlier today, it is the great Dallas Alejandro, who is the church in California, where she is since 1987. In particular, she is in charge of all of the outreach and pastor consultant to the NCCYM for sons and daughters in 1996. From 1990 to 2015, and he also was, they all were consultants, I can leave that line out. We have Father John Cusick, who is a priest of the Archdiocese of Chicago, where he had served as director of young adult ministry from 1977 to 2014. With his longtime colleague, Dr. wrote The Basic Guide to Young Adult Ministry in 2001. Father John informed me that he created young adult ministry in 1977 and that he was with Theology on Tap from its inception in 1981 until 2013. And we also have Paul Henderson, who serves as lead consultant with pastoral strategy. He worked for 25 years at the USCCB in a number of roles, including the coordination of World Youth Day 1993 in Denver, and the bishop's efforts with youth, young adults, publications, and planning, including overseeing the development of this document. So these are our panelists today. In order to understand the context, as Paul said, to look back at the context, to understand what was the moment that brought sons and daughters to fruition, Paul is going to give us a little introductory oversight where he's going to explain to us what were some of the circumstances that led to the development of the document, what was happening in young adult ministry before sons and daughters, and why was it important for a pastoral plan to be written, and a little bit about how it came to be.
Great. Thank you all. Can you all hear me? Let me just move this. You'll get your mic back. Oh, this is my. First of all, it's great to be here, and I left the Bishops' Conference. I figured they'd had enough of me, and they needed some new blood in there in 2013. But it was 25 fantastic, wonderful years. A lot because of people like yourself that I worked with in the different offices. And since then, I've been working with a number of dioceses on communication planning and helping a number of Catholic organizations. What we didn't have with our ministry with young people. And so there were opportunities of why develop the plan, but there were also some needs. And one of the needs was that there was a real recognition among the bishops that the bishops themselves, and Bishop, I think you even touched on this a little bit, that the bishops had a responsibility to promote young adults and their ministry with the church. This wasn't something that there was just, oh, this would be nice to do, but this was a demand of the government. At this point in 1994, this was before the General Directory on Catechesis. This was before the National Directory. This was before our hearts were burning within us, the faith formation. So this document took place at a moment in which the church was doing a lot of reflection on what is good ministry in the church at this time. So one was the pastoral outreach to preach the gospel. The other was the experience of young adults in society, that the bishops were coming to a real awareness that young adults had an experience. And then the third was engagements of young adults in themselves. And part of this was really driven by those in official ministry within dioceses and parishes who were sort of like waving the hands and saying, hey, official church, you need to have something formal for us. So what were then the goals of the planning process? Number one was to really to state formally, and the bishops wanted this, to say that young adult Catholics are important to the life and ministry of the church. It was a formal statement. So sons and daughters of the life was meant to be a formal statement by the body of bishops that you as young adults are important. The second thing was that if we're going to say someone is important, we have to acknowledge the reality of their lives. So if you look at and think about the chapters in Sons and Daughters, there's a whole chapter that's devoted to the life experiences of young adults at that point. It's interesting, when I was rereading it, there's some things that are different today, but there's a lot that's the same. You know, ever new, ever old within that. The third point was that the bishops really wanted to develop a comprehensive plan for ministry with young adults, something that would be, you know, a guide for those who were doing pastoral work. But the value was that this guide was based on the experiences that were taking place in dioceses and parishes. The document wasn't to be from top down, but it was really to be to take the best of our theology and to take the best of our pastoral experience and weave the two together. One of the things that we had as a discussion in the laity office was that we really wanted within the laity committee was that we would be successful and the bishops would be successful with this document if it was a good document on pastoral ministry, period. Take out the word young adult and substitute youth, adults, seniors, and contextualize it to their appropriate age. And then, how did we develop the plan? We knew, and the bishops on the committee had a strong sense, and this really came about as the experience of the bishops with World Youth Day in Denver. One of the sayings that, as general coordinator for the Denver experience, that I kept saying to the bishops that were part of it was that all we have to do was to pave the way and then let it happen. That the young people will really make it. And so one of the things that we really knew that if we were going to be successful with this document is that it had to be built on the experiences of the young people themselves. They were, in a sense, the people who would catechize us. And part of that then became that the first thing that was done by the steering committee and the committee on the laity was there was a request to every bishop in the country to sit and listen with the young adults of their diocese, all different young adults, not just those who were in church every Sunday, but to really try to find and to reach out to all the young adults and to listen. And then to send to us at the USCCB, what did you hear? The laity committee wanted to know, what was it you were hearing? Then with that, there was a national steering committee. 3 of the folks are here, in which we pulled it all together. We invited about 30 young adults from around the country to come together to help us interpret what the thousands of responses that we got from across the country, and that's how we began building the plan that was before you. And part of the value, and this is the last thing, and then it is that the plan went through discussion of the body of bishops so easily because every bishop sitting in that assembly had gone through a listening session, and they knew from their own experiences what the young adults were saying in their dioceses.
Thank you. Would me the rest of our panel like to offer a clarification, an insight?
Correction.
Correction to that experience.
I would just add that I think there was just some practicalities that happened. I remember at the time, and when we were invited to do this, I know in Los Angeles, one of the practicalities was at that time campus ministry was, I mean, I guess the word I would use is upset, that so many older people and people who were not campus people were showing up at all the campus ministry stuff. And I know, I know. So that began conversation among people. There was also the fact of, you know, actually John says it much better, which is that church had changed. Things were different. Even if I was a volunteer then, and even then you knew, for instance, the idea and expectation that young adults would just come back to church once they graduated, once they married, once they had kids, was leaving, was gone. We saw that. And, you know, it's funny. I mean, I know it was a strong point for us. I don't know if it was as strong in the document, and maybe we couldn't be that strong, but that was definitely a concern. And I know even locally that was a concern, where some pastors in LA noticed the fact that people weren't coming back. Your traditional giving families were saying, hey, and this actually what started young, really one of the things that started young adult ministry at St. Monica was the fact that there were some families that went to the pastor and said, we helped you do all this, we helped you raise money. Not one of our kids is participating in the Catholic Church. So we already saw and discussed numbers. Now, probably Paul has a better sense of the numbers and what the statistics were then. But that was, even then, it was pretty obvious.
I think too that at that time I was at this was
94, 95.
94, 95. At that time I had just finished with my time at Catholic U. I was a chaplain at Catholic U for 6 years, and before that I was at Grambling State University, where everybody's somebody and every somebody has its place, but moving right along. Most people, and I suspect most in this room, if they know anything about Grambling State University, know about its football life. But it was an extremely adept HBCU, historically black college, with some extremely wonderful programs in music, especially. Everybody in the band was a music major, which is almost unheard of. Sociology of education and nursing and all that. But in any case, so I was there before I landed at the Atlanta University Center, which is a consortium, I guess we could say, of 6 historically black colleges and universities, 4 of which were undergraduate institutions. And I had been asked to, at that time I belonged to the Archdiocese of Louisville, and I had been asked by my bishop then, Archbishop Kelly at the time, to, after I finished my doctorate at Howard University in Washington, I asked him, he asked me if I would please go to Atlanta and assist Archbishop Marino, who wanted to build a Newman Center in the Atlanta University Center. Do you know the place? Yes, I said, yes, I do know the place. So I went at that time. He said, you know, everybody, it only takes you about 5 years to build a building, then you come back and be all set. Well, 5 years was 25 years ago. And, but in any case, so that's how I got there. And in the midst of this, which is where I want to respond to what they were saying. The reason I agreed to be on the writing committee was that one of the things that you're signaling in terms of the absence of young adults in the church was that this has begun to happen in black communities, black Catholic communities specifically, for some time. And in terms of young adult ministry in general and campus ministry in particular, there were, I think, at that time, 111 HBCUs in the country, and 35 of them had campus ministry programs. And at our campus ministry and young adult gatherings, young adults and people who were working in these fields were conspicuously absent, as we see is still the case as we look around this room. And that is of deep concern when you talk about the universality of the church, when you talk about, especially in the United States, the diversity of the church, and when we don't see that same diversity in any way. Many things that were changing at the time, and another one of the reasons I was anxious to participate was that it was a way in which I could at least assist at making a greater presence of Black Catholic young adults who I had been working with and whose competence I knew, to participate in this work of really creating a different way to evolve a pastoral program. And so I was very happy to do it and very happy to be involved in the process that involved, I think there were, we had 30 people in the listening, and I think 6 of them, I think, are African American. Of course, today, there's a whole different complexion, to use the word, now, but that's another question. So.
It might be interesting to give a run-up to what happened in my life prior to getting the call from Paul Henderson to be on this committee. In 1977, I was leaving my first assignment, and I was 32 years old. And I had a phenomenal first assignment as a Catholic priest. You couldn't have written it any better than we lived it. It was magnificent. So I didn't want to go to another parish right away because you'd be looking over your shoulder saying, well, over there we did it that way. Well, there's no 2 parishes that are alike. There's no 2 thumbprints that are alike. And so let go of that stuff. So I was offered a job at the college seminary, and I took it. And Cardinal Cody, I mean, we're going way back. Cardinal Cody's main guy, Father Ray Sullivan, said, would you think of doing campus ministry? This is before I took the seminary job. And I said no, because the only campuses in Chicago that were staffed by the diocese would have been the University of Chicago or Northwestern, and I'm a C student who could never work in that operation at all. They would have buried me. And I don't know how you do commuter college campus ministry unless you stand at the end of the parking lot and wave to people when they're leaving to go to work. So I blew off that idea. He came back then and said, would you consider coordinating a young adult ministry? And in all honesty, 1977, some of you weren't alive. I said, what is that? There was no such thing in the Catholic Church as young adult ministry. He said, well, it's beginning some kind of an outreach to people after their college age years. Didn't say college years, but college age. So I defined that, of course, as early 20s. None of this 18 to 35 nonsense. That's a bunch of crap. And so then I said, why would we want to do that? And this is where he was prophetic, and it's been played up here already. He said, John, we're beginning to sense that those after college years are beginning to pull away from the church. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 1977. Would you call that in 2016 prophetic statement? Very, very prophetic. We most likely have lost 2 generations already of young people. So that's where I began. Now, I had to understand that there's a lot of stereotypes out there, and there are reasons for stereotypes. And the stereotype of early 20s is the church is for losers. It's for people who have nothing better to do with their life. Well, I am a mover and a shaker. I wanted the healthy people that you could build off of. And then there's room for everybody in the tree. And so I began by direct personal invitation. You know what I call that? The Jesus method of organizing. The Lord Jesus did not put a sign on a palm tree. All those who want to be apostles, sign up here and come to a meeting Tuesday night in the basement of a frickin' synagogue. He went out and he said, you, and you, let's go. And we began to build a ministry in Chicago based on that principle. 17 years later, Paul invited me to be on the steering committee.
Thank you. So if we look at the document, I have to believe it was an exciting time to do something that was needed and new and engaging. Just from the sake of the room, we've already talked about people who were not born in 1977. How many of you were present at World Youth Day in 1993 in some capacity? I will share with you that what I hear about World Youth Day in 1993 from people who attended as young people was that it was amazing and it was awesome and it was a watershed moment in their faith life. Many people that I know who became ministers, it was a result of that experience. The people I know who were adults then said, I thought we were going to die. That's true. It's always that true. There's very little middle ground that I hear about this experience. So building off of that, and then the years that followed it, I have to believe that was exciting. So I'm curious, what were your favorite parts? As this came from an idea and experience and came to paper, what were your favorite parts of this document? And are there areas that maybe you wish 20 years later you could have done more with?
Well, I'll start off with the fact, and bearing in mind that at some point of my life, the last 28 years, I've done either full-time, part-time, or partial time being in charge of young adult ministry. And not just working with my own community, but being often asked by others who are trying to build young adults. So that's kind of how I base some of my answers here. First of all, I love the fact that we did define what the ministry was, and that we actually gave a kind of age range, because really, honestly, desperately, in some cases, people across the country, sometimes you had hard times, and I know it's still happening now, where you had to make sure you were different from youth. You had to explain to people this could not be youth, that we had to be apart from that. Also in cases like, we're in Los Angeles and Santa Monica, that there is a definition. It's mid there, it's 20s and 30s. It doesn't go into 40s. That's a different life experience. So the fact that we defined it as much as we could at the time and gave some understanding, particularly of what it meant for young adults, how they built their identity, what relationships, the meaning of work for young adults. And that could be a whole book now, the difference between now and then. Then and now, right? Young adults now that I work with, they are amazed that I've been in a job for 28 years. We know that most of them will have multiple jobs, right? Multiple jobs. They're not going to just have one thing. You might have a career path, but you're not going to have the same job. So that's just one little piece there. And the fact that we were trying to help people understand what a young adult's person's life was like in those areas of identity, relationships, the meaning of work, and spiritual life, information, how it had to be different for young people. I'm glad that we tried to speak to the diversity of the community at the time. As Paul said a little bit ago so well, there were so many great things happening at the time, other movements. Encuentro, I went to one of the Encuentros at the time. That inspired us. We had to read some of that and found it to be actually very practical of that. And we tried to speak to single and married, tried to speak to I think here we use the word multimedia, that made me laugh. Now we say more like social media technology. But we also, in reading this for this, we also try to talk about how poverty affects young adults, and that's a reality in our country. Now, I couldn't find it in the document, but I remember we had a huge discussion once about the fact of two institutions or two places where there's a lot of young adults, and how have we touched those institutions. One was the military, you think of that, and the other is correctional systems, the prison. I mean, which, you know, that's a whole other thing. But so I'm glad we tried to speak to those. My favorite, so that's one of my favorite parts, that we try to define it and try to explain to people what the reality of the young person's lives were. My best and most used part is at the very end, where among us we came up with, if you had to get started in young adult ministry, whether you were on your own, in a parish or a diocese, we have 10 steps. Myself, and I brought my colleague over here, Christine, we use that all the time in talking to people. We use it in our training. Every time we have a core meeting of our young adult leaders, we always have 5 or 10 minutes. I don't go over the whole thing. As a matter of fact, they're all shocked that I'm here. Like, what? What did you do 20 years ago? But I always try to bring in pieces. We use a lot of John's book to remind people that there are principles out there and things to do, especially talking about involvement, participation, how do you get people engaged to have those conversations. And of course, you know, it's interesting, as time has gone on, we oversee a variety in my department of various outreach ministries. And I have to tell you, when I started at St. Monica's 28 years ago, there were about 4 of them. Now we have about 40 to 42 projects. All of them, because Dallas has been there, have had some piece of what I learned in young adult ministry, some piece of that has transferred over. Some more than others, okay, some more than others. But what I learned definitely transferred over.
For the sake of time, I'm
yeah.
going to ask if anyone else would like to Paul.
Before you get to Paul,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, wait a minute, Paul. I just wanted to say that the method of the listening sessions and the fact that it was duplicated across the country, and it was a new thing for a new process by which pastoral letters were written. I mean, it was the first that was done in that way. Was extremely important. I was the facilitator of the young adult section. There were 2 of us who were asked to be facilitators of the young adult section of World Youth Camp. And there were 10,000 young adults in Hall C, if you can imagine. And from all over the world. And what something struck me in the midst of things. I was asked to introduce Cardinal Toomey to the group gathering. And I had learned something in my time in Africa, in Africa. And I learned something in my time in Africa, and that was the experience of the community praying over the person who was about to present. So I took a quick glance around the room, the hall of 10,000, 20,000. And so I just invited anybody of African descent to come to the front and just extend their hands of gratitude. And I keep hearing from people who were there, now that they are into their 30s now, and 40s, I guess some of them, of how important that was to them, to be able to truly give something of themselves in that experience. So that's what is most impressive to me about this, that Dulles has mentioned. This process by which we heard from young adults themselves about what was necessary.
I just wanted to say that when we were developing the documents, and the bishops were talking about it, it was really seen about building bridges. And it's about connections and encounters and linking people. So it's really about relationships. If you look throughout the document, it really talks, everything points to, it's a relationship with Christ. It's a relationship with the church. And if you have one of the first 15-year printed editions of the document, the cover is people.
Yeah.
But if you have the latest edition, is that it's about, that's the original. If you have what's presently published, it's a bridge, and it's about building bridges. And part of it was when I was director of publishing, I think in 2006 or 7, we actually changed the cover because we were hearing more and more that young adult ministry really is more about building bridges. And it's about connecting people with Christ and the church.
So to move on to our next question, Father John, at this point you've been doing young adult ministry for a number of years. So you were called to be on this committee. What did you hope would be accomplished in the writing of this document?
I work off this principle. Dream big, think small, go slow. When Paul called me, I saw this as an opportunity to dream real big. We would be getting calls in Chicago from many people across the country. How do you do this? How do you do that? And there was a hunger for practicality. How come we only get the same 30 people every time we do a retreat? How come this? How come that? Well, I felt it was time to put my oar in the river of practical planning and help create a document. As Paul referred to in his opening remarks, sons and daughters of the light could be used for any age level of ministry. It could be anything from social justice to senior citizens. It's practical ways to engage the people of God, to invite them into greater participation in the church, and to hand it to them and give them the skills necessary to pass it on. That to me was critically important. And I think if you take sons and daughters of the light, and I'm not going to do anything past then, but at that time, and put it up against other bishops' documents, you'll see one enormous difference. One is eyebrows up, and the other is hairline down. And I always believe that a good bishop's document, because they are the catechists, they're the ones who hold the crosier, the staff, they're the teachers, they're the pastors, that it has to be practical. And I think the greatest gift that I believe we gave the church, and gave it to the bishops to give to the church, if you want to be honest about it, was here is something practical that you can do. And because it was done by many of us already, we knew it worked. We knew that if you followed these things, you could engage a generation that was beginning to create more and more distance from itself and its own religious roots. And if we could engage people, then there was a healthy future. And so that's what I believe the gift of what Sons and Daughters of the Light is all about. Hands-on, practical, workable, and you could easily see proven results.
Would any of the rest of you like to respond to that? What did you hope would be accomplished when this document was developed?
That church was different. The church was not welcoming. I think to young people, that was huge in all the listening sessions. And unfortunately, I have to say, even now when I do get a complaint from someone in the community, it'll be about where people felt they weren't welcome. a couple trying to get married. I know this is one of John's big things, but, you know, and the kind of things they put people through. So I hoped it would open more doors to that. I believe that definitely some of the seeds we set and others set did fall in places. It saddens me sometimes that it's still certain places. You know, like I was saying yesterday to Paul and John, that in some ways where we live on the west side of Los Angeles, St. Monica, after 28 years, would be still the only game in town, and there's something wrong with that. Okay, it's nice to say, Dallas, you're a wonderful person, you did great work, but there's something not right with that. You know, why aren't some of these skills and things that John's talking about, why didn't that transfer through? And I mean, the last thing I would say is probably if I were to do the document again or the next document, it would be how to be a young adult friendly church, very practical. But going back again to the fact that all different different groups have said in general that probably the title would be how to be a friendly church, how to welcome people, how to engage people, how to accept people where they are. You know, that this was hopefully a lens, and I think it did open many people's eyes to that, but it still needs to be.
Yeah, I think that you know, following up on that comment is that one of the major differences I think that the document itself brought was attention to the fact that we were not paying attention. You know, young adults would come to church and, you know, they sit there, nobody would talk to them, they go home. They hear all about families and but nobody's talking to them. But also, I think that what is an important thing and will be important in the future is I just did something that I hadn't done in years, really, about maybe a month ago, a presentation on Sons and Daughters of the Light for a group of people in Louisville who were called together by the Office of Multicultural Affairs. But in any case, so I did this workshop on Sons and Daughters, and these are all people who are of various ages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And none of them, before this event, had heard of Sons and Daughters of the Light. And, you know, most of these are African Americans who, you know, are always talking about the absence of young adults in church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but they had never heard of Sons and Daughters of the Light. But I also deal with a number of seminarians in various contexts around the country for various reasons. And what is disheartening to me is that they too have never heard of Sons and Daughters of the Light. This is the problem. So, to you who are millennials and slightly past millennials, I think what has to happen with the next iteration is a process by which there is not a soul on the face of the earth that does not hear about whatever it is you produce.
I can't reiterate enough how the target group of young adults have changed dramatically, absolutely dramatically. 20 years ago, Week Ago Sunday, 20 years later, Cardinal Bernardine died. And he was a rallying point for my work in young adult ministry. Now, I've always believed, and I don't know if this has ever gotten into your heads, we are supposed to make the bishop look good. Anybody who's in the cabinet, I'm very serious here, anybody who's in the cabinet has got to make the boss look good. So if we invite the bishop to something, the place better be packed, or else we've not done our job. Number two, we are to know more about young adults in the church than anybody else in the diocese. What is happening now nationally is a president-elect is putting together people in a cabinet known for their skill, expertise, or passion in one particular aspect of American life. And what do? Advise the main man about their field of expertise and how it interfaces with government and culture. You are the experts in young adults, their lifestyles, their patterns, their relationship to church. And I believe we also have the obligation, whether it's tough news or not, to sit our bishops down and say, here's the territory. I really believe that. We used to track every year the number of people who came to things, because you were always looking for trends. And Paul knows, when he was in the Archdiocese of Chicago, that we never did the same thing twice. Every year when something was finished, we would take it apart, almost like an autopsy, and put it back together. And so one of the ways we tracked something very critical to how young adults have changed, 23 years ago, we peaked at Theology on Tap. We had Theology on Tap in 49 parishes simultaneously over a 4-week period. Run the numbers. 49 times 4. How many nights of catechesis does that offer a local church? That's pretty powerful stuff. We invited everybody to the cathedral at the end of Theology on Tap for Mass with the Cardinal, and then a picnic in his backyard. We peaked at 1,200 people. The last year I did it, 2012, under 300. I'm not ashamed to say that. You know what happened? The target group changed. They became indifferent to church. When I began in young adult ministry, and what prompted Sons and Daughters of the Light, were people coming out of schools, looking for where they could pray, looking for where they could plug in. People who finished JVC, they had no place to go. Parishes ignored them because it was for Ma, Pa, and the kids. And they weren't Ma, Pa, and the kids. But they were looking for what they might have found at Marquette at a Sunday night Mass, or Loyola, or the many places that people gathered for worship. And guess what? They could not find it. One young man came up to me and he said, Father, I even went to the parish and asked to read on Sunday, some way to stay plugged in. They never got back to me. Today, who's doing that? Take a look on Sunday. Take a look on Sunday at the community ministers, the lectors. Just take a look from the pew and count how many people appear to be under 40. And you know what? Nobody does anything about it. As long as we have function, we worry not about form. As long as the job's getting done, we don't care who's doing it. And so Sons and Daughters of the Light was put together in such a way that it might have been helpful for people who felt a prompting to do more but didn't know how to do it. To engage our own Catholic people in a positive way, to be much more a part of church. If I had to do it over again and somebody called and said, what would be the follow-up to Sons and Daughters of the Light? Oof. It would be scary. Because we're now talking about a target group, except, for the saved, that just, they don't see the value of the religion. They don't see the value of the church. That's really hard today. In many ways, I've worked in the best years because I had people who were hungry for church, and Paul, who called us together to organize and facilitate that hunger. But today, I really believe we need two things. Number one, missionary zeal. Ladies and gentlemen, you are the missionaries to go out to a people to evangelize them. And you know who the target of evangelization in the Catholic Church should be today? Our own younger people. Please, I beg you, get that in your bishop's ear. The target of evangelization are our own younger people. And to me, that is critically important. I really, really believe that. We have to have missionary zeal. Number two, this is something you might not have bought into when you took these jobs, and that's the role of advocacy today. You have to be the advocates for a generation of Catholics who don't understand why they should even bother with us. We have to advocate for that. I wrote down two things a little earlier, Paul, and this would be fun. If you've got some people that you bounce ideas off of, or who are your real leadership, wouldn't it be fun to come together in the next, say, early 2017, if you live in these lousy climates like Chicago where you're dug in until April, wouldn't it be fun to write a pastoral letter for your bishop? Write a pastoral letter for your bishop. This is what you'd like to see your bishop send out to the local church, to his priests, to his lay ministers, to his schools, to parents, to young adults, to wherever it is. What would you want your bishop to say? That's advocacy. Number two, Paul mentioned, Paul Jarzembowski mentioned that the Pope is going to have an exhortation or something coming out in 18. Wouldn't it be a hoot to play Pope for a week? Write an exhortation for Francis. What would you like, based upon your knowledge, your background, your talent, your work, your ministry, and your mission? What would you like the Holy Father to say to the world about the upcoming generations of younger people? It may never go anywhere, but you know something? You took in your dreams, you put them on paper or in a machine. But do it for your bishop. And then ask, Bishop, can we sit and talk? Not for 20 minutes on your schedule, but can we come to your house some night and just sit and talk? We want to present something to you, and maybe we can work together on this. That would be the next stage of sons and daughters of life.
We're going to give Paul the opportunity to answer this question, but I just wanted to let you know that when his response is finished, we will be calling for questions from the floor. So if you have questions, for the sake of time, just to allow us to have good interaction, if you could please direct your question at one of the panelists, that we can get as many questions as possible. Go ahead.
Actually, as I've been listening, I really agree with what's been said, and one of the things that has always been a challenge when I was at the Bishops' Conference was implementation of stuff. And one of the things that I find now in the work that I'm doing with Catholic organizations and dioceses on communication planning is actually implementation. And I think a challenge for sons and daughters was that it really was, we put it out there in '95, and we really didn't have the bishops didn't, they moved on to something else, and we didn't have the implementation of it. So this, this is a great opportunity for you all. The other thing is that when John was talking about the zeal, one of the things that was exciting about what was happening in '94 and '95 with this document was that there was a great group of folks together who had the zeal. And one of the things that, especially with what Paul was saying at the beginning, just to really underscore, for you all, become a great community of advocates and a community that has the zeal for the mission. The church always needs the advocates, the people that have the zeal. And so stay in touch with each other. NCCYM has moved on, but there's still the secretariat and the conferences is picking it up, so continue that zeal.
Thank you. Is there anyone who has a question for our panel? Could you please say your name and where you're from?
Hi, I'm Nessa, and I'm from Toronto. I think my biggest question is, 20 years out from Sons and Daughters of the Light, do you think there's still a need for young adult-specific ministry? We always say about youth ministry that from youth ministry we want to engage youth into the life of the parish or link them into the life of the parish. I'm now finding 39-year-olds, because my ministry goes 18 to 39, who have that same need. They haven't made that step, and I'm someone who is actively engaged in my faith and feel lonely in my faith as a young adult. I wonder if we need small Christian communities.
Directed to anybody?
Everyone.
Can one of you choose? I don't know.
Go, John.
Well, okay, small Christian communities are fine, but let me get everybody upset with election. Small Christian communities, as good as they are, produce small results. What we're looking at here are generations who are not around. We're looking at here at an attitude adjustment that's got to come from the top down. Here's a question I would put to you, and I'm going to answer it, so it's not going to be much of a question. What do you think is the most critical question facing the Catholic Church today in America and Canada? Most critical problem facing the church, the lack of the presence of younger people. You can't have an operational theology if there's going to be nobody in front of you. I'm serious. When we realize, and if we're honest and look and see who we're gathering on the weekends, Saturday night Mass, our senior citizens and moms with their kids. Sunday Masses, the prime Masses, are many older people today. When we look at young parents, how long are many young parents engaged in parish life? For the length of time their children are involved in education. Then guess what? They're gone too. This is alarming. To me, I track data. Because data doesn't lie. It's like a scale. A scale in your bathroom is the only thing that won't lie to you. When you get on, the numbers are the numbers, and they're not, well, sort of or maybe. Data doesn't lie. And data is saying, we've got a real critical issue on our hands. And so in specific answer to your question, should there be a continued ministry to young adults? Absolutely.
But does it have to look different as well?
It has to look massively different. It has to look, on your part, if I can be so bold, as advocacy. Here are some things. In the Archdiocese of Chicago, marriages in the Catholic Church are down, hold on, 50%. You can find this on the internet by going to archchicago.org and pulling up statistics. Since the turn of the millennium, the Archdiocese of Chicago has lost 139,000 Catholics in the October count, going from 561,000 down to 422,000. That's 24.7% drop in attendance. Now ask the question, who are the 24.7%? Ain't me, I'm there all the time. My generation, I'm 71 years old. Hell, we've been at this all our life. It's good. I love it. The church makes a lot of sense to me and to my friends. It's life-giving to me. Who's not there? Young families, young marrieds, young adults. And so what are we doing in young adult ministry? It's becoming less and less and less at a time when there should be money behind it, advocacy coming out of it, information shared with all levels of church to find better ways. We have to learn that the two great moments of young adult ministry, first moments for them, are marriage and baptisms.
We have a follow-up question.
Brian Miller from St. Louis. I'm a little shocked to hear you say that small communities produce small results. because I've seen exactly the opposite in our young adult groups, in that small communities is where investment in lives happen, and then because there's no community in parishes, that's where young people actually fail to get involved, where everything is on this larger corporate level. I think we can do large events until we're blue in the face and tell people Jesus loves them and ask them to encounter Jesus, but until they hear from someone, get someone investing in their life, it's not really going to take effect, and they're going to get engaged in the community in that parish, to be present, to be married there, to have baptism. So, I mean, how do you, I mean, would you stand by that statement, or do you want to put it in a different context maybe?
No, I'll stand by the statement. And I'm not saying small communities are bad. They're fabulous. They are absolutely life-giving. But I'm talking about, from our point of view as people in ministry and in young adult ministry, we have to face this entire massive generation of people, most of whom will not ever be a part of small-based communities. Let me give an example. I'm an only child. My parents are dead, so it's going to stay that way for a while. My family joined nothing. They wouldn't. My father went to a Holy Name Society meeting every once in a while to get away from my mother. But today, you just turn on the other TV, and that takes care of that. So there are a lot of non-joiners out there. I think the church can't always be having people come to groups, big or small. The church has got to learn to go out to people. We have to be the ones who proclaim the message. We have to explain reasons for things, not just laws for things. Presume little, explain lots is a great ministry.
Paul?
I think one of the greatest challenges, and I think we're seeing it play out here for the church, is we have a great theology. We really struggle, and I think what I'm hearing you say, John, is we really struggle in doing a diverse pastoral praxis. We tend to get focused on one or two things, but if we're going to reach a diverse audience, if we're going to reach everyone who is potential, then it can't just be one ministry outreach. It can't just be programs, and it can't be just one way of doing things. And I don't have an answer for that, but as I go around the dioceses, just talking to them about their pastoral planning, everyone is struggling with this issue. And the easy approach, which is also a great place to begin, but only to begin, is at those who are in the pews. But that's becoming a smaller and smaller segment. But how do we really reach a broader group of folks?
May I just say, Father John, you raised a very interesting question. And I think it ties in a lot of what you've been saying from my perspective. A vignette, and then I'll give you what my point is. We had a diocesan synod in Bridgeport. We had 430 delegates, 35 of whom were specifically chosen because they were young adults. And in a very key moment, in one intervention, a young man stood up and he said to the entire synodal assembly, he said, "Stop treating us as if we are a problem to be solved." Right. He said, "What we want, you want. We want good preaching, and so do you. We want a welcoming parish, and so do you." And he went through this entire list. He got a standing ovation. You asked a very interesting question. What is the most critical issue we face in the church? I'm speaking from my own personal, this is my assessment. I think it's the question of Pope Francis. Why is Pope Francis such a phenomenon? Because he's raising a question. The question is, what will make the communities of faith, small, big, diocesan, whatever they are, credible again? Because what's changed from 1977 to 2017 is that now most people create their own community. They don't need a sect community anymore. So we're inviting them to what? So whether it's a small community, I think they're great because they are intentional and they give life. But the truth is, every community has to ask itself the question, are we credible in the eyes of our people, and what do we need to do to change that? Whether they're young, middle-aged, or old, community has to become credible again, in my humble opinion. That's the challenge.
I was just going to speak to the need for diversity and approach, and how you need both. going back to small groups. We've had that experience at St. Monica's as well. We've had people of different ages experience that. But at some point, people sometimes want a little more, or I think of the fact that in our parish, one thing Christine and I reminded ourselves, in the last 10 years, we've had about 3 young adults who've been council chairs of our parish. I don't think it would have happened if they stayed in a small group. Eventually, they integrated in different things to the parish. And, you know, I would say we're definitely a parish that was transformed by young adult ministry, by some of those early approaches. It's a blessing. It was a lot of work. But some of those efforts had to be broader. And they had to be different. I go back to what John said. And again, the reason why sometimes you have to adapt what you're doing, going back to that it has to look different. It does have to look different sometimes to attract people. And for people to feel that their message is being heard. We could talk more about this later in our discussions, but millennials, for instance, sometimes it's what's probably, of my 28 years, one of the hardest groups to get involved. You all know this now. They want to be specifically involved. They want to know the task more. Unlike the previous pioneers or the Generation X, they want to know, and eventually they want to know that what they're doing, what they're sharing is understood by the pastor. As a matter of fact, this is a group where the priests are a little more important than the other generations, and I don't want to put down priests, but I'm just saying that when I look at the difference, and part of that, again, is difference in approach. And the last thing I'm going to share is just the fact that I recently, and I'm sending them to you, Jason, recently I went to a talk, it was with Respect Life folks. I walk in, okay, they want to talk about Respect Life issues. No one childbearing is in that room. So it's all much older people, older than me. So I'm kind of saying, you know what, the first thing I'd like you to advocate for is for young adult ministry in your parishes. Because who are you talking to? You're talking to people older than me. That is not helpful. So there's difference in approach and how people feel they're going to be listened to. Anyway.
I have an article with me, and I think I looked at my case back there, but in any case, an article with me that I discovered maybe about 8 months ago. But in any case, the title of the article is Why Black Young Adults Are Not Leaving the Church. And I've been just thinking as we are sitting here and talking that we have to never talk to anybody, it seems, but ourselves. Why don't we go and talk to folks who are not having this problem, who are in fact having success? Black young adults are not leaving the church. Black Lives Matter is a young adult movement, and it has been going on for some time, and it is not about the Star-Spangled Banner. We are not going to learn in the public media what Black Lives Matter is all about. This is the next civil rights movement, and you will never hear that unless you talk to the people who are in the middle of it. And we don't do that. And I just think that in terms of what will happen with young adults among us, et cetera, I just think our answers are here on the face of the earth, and we have to look beyond ourselves.
We have one last question. I just wanted to return to this discussion we had about large group format versus small groups. And I've been involved in young adult ministry both domestically and overseas for about a decade now, and it's what the Bishop Frank was talking about, where it really is not one or the other. It's a diversity of ministries, because in the large group, you can attract, you can bring in people from all over, and they can come in. But in a small group, it's where people don't feel lonely. It's where people actually have the opportunity to have an intimacy of a pastoral relationship that is critical to them feeling that they are a part of the church and somebody cares. And people can get lost in a large group, and they can get cliquey really fast. And not just large versus small, but also the diversity. Some people are more drawn according to their charisms to social justice ministry. Some are more called to prayer ministry. Some are called to Bible studies. You have no idea how hard when I travel to different dioceses and find out how few even Bible studies, scripture studies are available for young adults. And And so I think when we're looking at an effective young adult ministry, we need to look at a variety of different options in both large and small groups. And it is in small groups also that people can become involved in the larger church, not just in the large groups, because it's in the small groups where they feel a part of something that matters and where people intimately get to know somebody, see what kind of character and skill sets they have, and bring them in and connect them. And I want to know what your response would be to that.
I would say amen. You know, my experience when I was working in different areas of the USCCB and working with different ministries is that there isn't one size fits all. And the more, and when we go down that route, we head to poor, ineffective ministry. But there's something else that I discovered, and my prior boss at USCCB, Helen Osmond, wrote a paper on it, and it was titled, it was for communication, it was titled, "We Are Not the Audience." And one of the things, and I keep testing this when I'm out with different groups, and everyone keeps agreeing with it, is that one of the greatest challenges that we have as ministers is that we tend to create our ministry to reflect our needs, not always the needs of the broader parish or the broader community. And so part of it is diversity is, yes, there is no one size fits all. So, but it's really about what are the needs of the young adults that are in your geographic area. And then the church has its ministry, but how do we connect with the needs of those folks? Otherwise, it's never going to work.
One of the things,
2 minutes.
1,000, 1,000. One of the things that Kate DeVries and I, when we worked together for 25 years in our office, did was what we call problem solving. And Brian, an example of that in terms of small versus large. We would hear, and I'm sure many of you in this room would hear this time and time again, our young people don't know their religion. They don't know their faith. You hear that all the time. Well, I would go back and say, okay, a lot of those we're talking about are young adults. The vaccination didn't take the first time around. Well, what can we do about that thing? And this is the large thing now. And they're not going to read the catechism. They're not going to come to adult education in a parish. But there is another catechism we have, and you're going to see it tonight at Mass in the cathedral. I sat in that cathedral today. It's majestic. It's filled with Catholic signs and symbols. But guess what? Who knows what they mean? I would love to see in the back of every Catholic church a brochure that explains every religious image that can be seen by the eye. If there are statues, who are they and what's significant about them? If there's symbols in windows and things. We have a wonderful catechism. It's not in print. It's the earliest catechism of the church. It's what they did in Chartres. They put all the Bible stories in windows, and they explained visual images. What happens in a parish today if Dad, Tony, is with his son, Frankie, and little Frankie looks up and sees something in the church and says, "Daddy, what's that?" And Tony is not in a race on Sunday to get there. Tony doesn't know. So he uses the great George Carlin response. It's a mystery. Let's take away the mystery. That's one of the things that we do in young adult ministry is advocate for a catechesis in all of our buildings and a brochure in the back of the church that explains all of that. Knowledge is power. And if people are hungry for their faith, but don't know how to go about that, let's give them away. Part of my job was problem solving, and we created that. We created a brochure called Within These Walls, and we got it to parishes, giving them practical ways that they could write up a catechism, a catechesis, based upon what people see every Sunday. if and when they go to church. That's the big thing.
I would challenge that the modern today way to do that might be an app.
Yes.
Anyway,
Not
I don't care what it is, but even, you're not gonna open an app in the cathedral if you walk in at 10 o'clock in the morning and are overwhelmed by the beauty of it. There's gotta be something that's hands-on as well. Everything cannot be found on the screen. Some things still go in people's pockets.
Does anybody know who Casey Neistat is? Nobody knows who Casey Neistat is. No. He's a YouTuber with 5 million subscribers. And it is intoxicating to watch him. Since I've been retired, I've been able to do some things that I couldn't do before. And one of them is to watch YouTube videos, which are quite instructive, actually. And in the last 6 months, I've discovered this Neistat creature. And what he does is he takes his camera. He lives in New York. He has a wife and a baby. He gets on his skateboard, and he goes from home to work, and he just tapes all that is happening as he goes. And everybody he meets is another story. And you're in on this story. And he doesn't have to tell it because it's the interaction, it's the relationship that tells the story. And so I'm just hoping that especially, I'm really desperate for this to happen among this group. Because if you all become video bloggers, that's what they call them these days, if you all become video bloggers, then that in itself is the catechism of the 21st century.
I'd like to take a moment now just to thank our panel for being with us today, but also for the work, for the effort, for the listening that you did in developing the document Sons and Daughters of the Light, for paving the way for many of our ministries, and for giving voice and recognition to the role of young adults in the church, and again, for joining us today. I know some of you will continue to join us for the remainder of the forum. Some of you were unable to, so if you have additional questions or if you want to clarify or just comment on how amazingly similar and yet how drastically different things are from the time that they were engaging in this exciting work, I'm sure that they would love that conversation. And now we are going to take about a 15-minute break. So if you could be back in this room by about 3:20, and the snack break is down the hall and around the corner. Thank you.